Hello, and thank you very much for watching. Recently I made a short movie about Marie Antoinette on her last voyage through Paris. I wanted to try to recreate her and give her some simple facial animations, and like moving the eyes around and just changing her overall expression just a little bit, like here when she closes her eyes and thinks about her children and her husband. She was executed in Paris in 1793 on what's called Place de la Concorde today. Back then it was called Place de la République. And yeah, so what I did was that I'll just show you the Photoshop file. I animated it in After Effects. Just simple stuff, as you can see here in the Photoshop file. She can move her eyes around just a little bit. She can change her facial expression just a little bit. She can also look a little happier. This kind of looked weird actually, and I didn't like the look of it, so yeah, I just closed her eyes, and this was just some eyes I had from another image that I just put on top. So yeah, what I did was, so I looked at, I read a lot about Marie Antoinette, and this is a painting of her, and yeah, she had quite a mild and open face in this painting anyhow. So I have the luxury and privilege of having access to Shutterstock. I know that I'm very privileged to have that, and not everybody has that. But I found this image of a young lady who also has a open and mild face, and then I also found an image of this beautiful senior lady here, because Marie Antoinette was 37 when she was executed, and she'd been through a really tough time. So this young lady here needed some of those beautiful wrinkles from this lady here. So what I did was that I started out, I probably should say that this might not be for a video for people who just started out using Photoshop. I'll be using a lot of shortcuts. I won't be explaining those, because this is about the technique sounds so fancy. It's just about how to animate those eyes and change the expression in a very easy way. So I apologize for not talking about the shortcuts, but yeah, right now it's just the technique. So I just made the selection around the eye, and I just made a new selection via cut, and now here's the eye, and here's the empty this, what's it called, the socket. And what I do is that I just make a selection of the pupil like that, and just make a layout of that, and I'll just make a new layout of that, and I'll just rotate it, and I'll just place the center approximately on top of the other center. Just change the opacity, it makes it easier, like that. Looks fine. And then I'll just erase the upper part here, so we have a complete iris here. The shortcut for erase is E. I really suggest using the shortcuts. You can save a lot of time on that. I'll just select the marquee, that's M, and just color the center of the iris black. And then I'll just make a new layer to create that eye highlight thing. There you go. And I'll just blur that a bit, just a couple of times. There you go. Maybe just put it down on 90, maybe 80% opacity. Then I'll just erase around the edges of the iris, because otherwise it'll look artificial. Just selecting the erase tool, and 100 for opacity and 100 for flow, and I'll just erase like that. Marie Antoinette was quite a few historians think that she was not an ordinary woman because she was raised in a royal family, but she was a woman who was caught in a river of events. Oh, sorry. The microphone is in front of the keyboard, like that. I actually think this should be 100. Yeah, better. Let's just link these here. Oh, sorry. That she was an ordinary woman caught in a series of extraordinary events around the French Revolution. Just a second, I'll just show you one thing here. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to paint some eyelashes here. Actually, let's just blur this first, so you don't have that sharp edged eye. You just use 20. You can just use the numbers as well here. If you want 60 or 40 or 20, just press the numbers. It's such a quick way to do it. Like that. There you go. And then we'll use the smudge tool to create our eyelashes. This is, I think it's a nice way to quickly paint a little bit of hair if you need it, or yeah, eyelashes like this. And it's just the strength, size, of course, of the smudge tool that decides how's it going to look. We could also maybe make one or two of them with the two. Like something like that. Yeah, that ought to do it. And then we have our pupil and our highlight. And what we're going to need is we're going to need some white to create the background for the eye. And we'll also use some of this white over here. There you go. There. So far, so good. So what we'll do now is that we'll make a new image. 2048 times 1536. This is not the format we use when we make the movie, but it's a nice format because the movie format is smaller, and if we use this format here, we'll have a little extra to work with. We'll just resize her to approximately the size that we want her to be, like that. We'll take our pupil, looks a little bit scary. Let's resize that, like that, something like that. And then we'll take our, where is it? It's there. Our white and our other white. It's there. There you go. Just erase that. So what we'll just do is that we'll just, if we select this white piece of white, we can scale it up. We won't be able to see that in the movie. And we'll scale the other white as well. It'll look fine when it's done. Like that. There you go. Maybe make this even bigger. And I think we'll put this on top. And what we'll do is just erase this part here so they kind of blend in together. Just like that. And we'll just lighten this a bit. Let's see how that looks. That's cool. We'll call that white. and maybe it should just be a little bit wider, more white, not whiter, but more white. There you go. And so let's just see how that looks. Maybe we should just give it a bit more. Let's do that. Give the eyelashes a bit more, because the image is smaller now. Should probably have less strength. Just to kind of, not have that. Very clear line. So there you go. So one eye is done now. Almost. What we do need is that we need some shadows here. Let's just make our brush a little smaller, just 100%. Just doesn't matter that it's too exaggerated here in the beginning. Let's just turn down the opacity. Just turn that down like that. Let's see what it looks like with 50% opacity. I think it should have a bit more up here. How does that look? Probably a bit too much. No worries. We'll just choose our erase tool. Just erase a bit here. Just turn it down on 20. Like that. How does that look? It's not too bad. Great. So far, so good. So now we have one eye finished. And what we'll do now is that we'll make the other eye. Marie Antoinette was married to Louis the 16th, and he was the grandson of Louis the 14th, also known as the Sun King, a very powerful king. And apparently Louis the 14th was not as competent as his grandfather. And what happened was ultimately the revolution broke out, and people were marching in the streets, and people were poor, and they were hungry, and they didn't feel safe, and the distribution of wealth was not fair, just as it's not fair today. That's a different story. And as I've understood it, what also happened was that in those years the weather was not very good, so the crops failed, and people were hungry, and they were scared, and they didn't they lost hope, and royalty spent too much money, and so on, and eventually people went to the street. And right there is Marie Antoinette and her kids. As far as I've understood, let's just call this shadow. She and her husband, the king, actually were quite fond of each other, as far as I've understood. Probably not all the time, but I think there were some affection there. And what they did was that when the revolution broke out, they fled Paris in the middle of the night with their 3 children. They got relatively far. They tried to reach the nearest friendly border, which, as far as I remember, was Belgium. I've read so many different historical, so much history lately, I can't remember all the details, but I think it was Belgium, and they got as far as to approximately 32 miles or so from the border. And in that small town, close to the border, they were recognized by the local postmaster, who knew how the king looked from coins, and they were sent back to Paris, all of them. And she was 37 at the time. That means that when we're using this woman here, we need to give her a bit more, a more experienced look. And so we'll use these beautiful wrinkles. I love wrinkles. Just makes a face just so nice to work with wrinkles. Just gives a face a lot of attitude. Makes it less perfect. The Buddhists, they always, as far as I've understood, make a flaw in all of their art and so on, because they don't think anything should be perfect. It has to be some kind of flaw. That has some divine reason, I think, as well. But nevertheless, I like flaws as well. Like, there you go. So a bit more, we call those, let's call that forehead, like that. There you go. And we'll do the same under the eyes, where all of us eventually can see how time passes by, like that. And what I'll do here is that I'll just make it a bit lighter, like that. Put it here, maybe just use the erase tool. Photoshop is just, yeah, love is a big word, but I must say that I really, I almost love working with Photoshop. I've had the pleasure of working with it since it was invented back in the 90s. Or late 80s, I can't remember actually. And I'm quite sure I remember working with Photoshop before layers, before they were actually introduced. And it's just, if you ask me, it's just one of the greatest pieces of software ever invented. It's just, yeah, I love it. Okay, I said it. I love working with Photoshop. There you go. Just turn the opacity down like that. So now she looks a bit more seasoned. Let's call those under eyes. Call that. And we'll just do the same with the around the mouth, because stuff will happen around your mouth eventually, like that. Just do this fast now. I won't talk too much. I'm sorry for talking so much. There you go, and there you go, and there you go. Piece of skin here, like that. Again, I can't recommend using the shortcuts enough. It will just save you a lot of time. Good. So this will be fine for now. Yes, you can see this is approximately what she looked like in Photoshop after she was done. I graded this a bit, but the idea is the same. I actually took her real chin and pasted that in here, just to have something from the painting. Can't really see it here. Something like that. Just put down the saturation just a bit, like that. So something like that. Good. So far so good. So what we need to do now is that we need, what happened so they were arrested and taken back to Paris, where they were imprisoned, and eventually her husband, the king, was executed, and she was imprisoned with her children. But one day they took them away, and her heart, as it's written, just broke. It said that they had to wrench her 8-year-old son out of her arms while she begged for compassion, and that there just wasn't any compassion. It's a very tragic story. Very, very tragic. And what happened is that her hair turned white overnight. And furthermore, they turned her son against her. I think they kind of indoctrinated him. They brainwashed him into thinking that she'd done things to him that most historians agree that she didn't. And her heart just broke. Just a second, I'll just make a backward gun down there. So what we're doing now, we're just borrowing this beautiful hair from Our Lady here. And the idea is that first of all, you have to try to make it blend in with the existing, with the young woman's hair. So just try to, I think this is too big like that. Something like that. How's that look? And take your time here. It's quite rewarding actually, I think. Because you can really see I think actually I made an extra layer here and just colored this a bit white, just with a very low like that, and maybe also here like that, something like that. So this pretty much starts to blend in now. And again, this is where you should definitely take your time, because it pays off. But it's okay already. Didn't take that long. And here you can see we have a hard line. If you need it, just invert it so that'll enable you to see the hard lines. You should definitely avoid those, because you might not see it right now, but then when you've made the movie and it's rendered and everything's done, you can see those lines suddenly. So something like that. And now for the last bit of the hair, what I do is that I, just like with the eyelashes, I select the layer and I choose the smudge tool. And here I'm probably going to need a strength of 90, I think. Just use the numbers. You can just 80, 40, 70, 95. Yeah, just use the numbers. So quick. There you go. So I'll just start drawing my hair. It's too low. It's not enough. 95, 97. There you go. There are only two things actually that you should pay attention to when you draw a hair like this, and that is the strength of the smudge tool and the direction of the existing hair. And again, the more time you spend, blah blah blah, but it's true. So, and if I just want some very short ones once in a while, just take it down to 80, And again, I know now this might look like it takes a lot of time, but it's actually not that much, not compared to, I think, the result, which can be quite nice. This might not work if you have a very high res image that you need to print or something. Well, it might actually, but I'm not sure. But for a movie like this, it'll work definitely. And maybe once in a while just make something that goes the other way around like that. So I will not waste your time anymore. You get the point. You did a long time ago. So this is the idea. And then when I'm done, I'll just use the blur tool with strength of 20, and I'll just blur it quickly like that. And I think very often you'll actually get a result that looks nice. In this case, obviously, you would probably want to erase this a bit more. So what we're just talking about the technique now, like that, so it kind of blends in with the original, something like that. And so in the end, I'll just have to find, where are you? There you are. In the end, she came to look like this. And she could move her eyes around, and she could change her expression a bit. And I just made a very simple horse carriage thing here. It's just some wood actually here with some shadows on like that, and some shadows. I just copied this layer here and just darkened it just to give it some kind of 3D feel. Again, some shadows, simple stuff again here, and the background like that. Couldn't allow the bicycles to be seen, and I just animated it very simply in After Effects. Thank you so much for your time. Take care and be well, and bye.